Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We had about 150 people register for today, which is very exciting. So I'll just allow a minute or two as people are still slowly joining us. So it's good afternoon for Eastern States and still a good morning to anyone from Western Australia. I'm sure we've got a few people there. All right, we've just ticked over just after 1 o'clock, so I'll get started as everyone's sort of slowly settling in. So welcome everyone to Scanlon Foundation's annual Community Grants information session. This is for 2022. It's our second information session. We ran one last year as well. Things are largely the same except for the literacy key criteria, so do keep a lookout for that. We have made some changes this year for the literacy stream especially. Before I get started officially, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you on. So I'm on the land of the Boonwurrung people along Port Phillip Bay in Melbourne, and I'd just like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. So welcome once again. I'll bring up my little slideshow for everyone now. But let me first just share my screen. Here we go. All right. Excellent. Here we go. So actually, while I just sit on my lovely fig tree, I will let you know I'm actually at home. I'm isolating with COVID. So I do have a cough, which is a shame. We are recording today's session, so I think my cough will just get recorded now for posterity. We have everyone's videos are off, they're all muted, but we do have the chat function enabled. So please feel free, put in any questions that you've got along the way. I will try and answer some questions as we go. If I don't get to them, I'm going to leave some time at the end. We've got hopefully we'll have quite a lot of time for some questions once I get to the end of the presentation, but I'll see how I go. Especially if there's something particularly relevant or something that's not clear as I go through, just let me know, it'll pop up for me. So the plan for today, I will do a little introduction to Scanlon Foundation for those who don't know us. For those who've had a grant with us before or applied with us before, this will probably just be a little refresher. For others, it might be brand new, so we'll try and give a little bit of background for you. The purpose of this grant round in particular, how to apply, the key application sections. So I'll go through in more detail the key criteria and the budgets. They're often sort of sticking points for people and quite important for us in terms of our assessment. A few tips at the end around some features of a successful project and then some questions. So we'll see how we go. So first of all, Scanlon Foundation, it's a private family philanthropy of Peter Scanlan and his family, and was started about 20 years ago now. The focus now is on social cohesion and supporting the transition of migrants into Australian society. So we fund both social programs and research. A big part of the research is the Mapping Social Cohesion report that we put out every year. So the next one's coming up this November. That report is actually now housed in our sister organisation, the Scanlon Foundation Research Institute. And while I talk about SFRI, the Mapping Social Cohesion report is obviously the big piece of research, a longitudinal study, and it informs a lot of the way that we do our granting and what we look for within the foundation. But the Institute also has a lot of other research, narratives, essays, and a little plug just while I'm here, we'll be releasing a podcast on Tuesday. Very exciting, next week. So if you're on our email list, on our mailing list, you'll get a little notification about that. If you do want any other information, just get in touch. But we're all pretty excited about that. So you'll hear Anthea our CEO, along with some special guests each week, just taking a bit of a deep dive into social cohesion issues and local current and relevant issues. The annual community grants, so this grant round is our one public grant round each year. So we run this at the same time every year, around July, August, and it tends to keep the same focus. It gets reviewed every year, but that employment and literacy focus that we have continues to be key issues. Obviously, I think everyone working in the sector would know. So something that we continue on with. For the foundation, we have a few really key, what we call satellite initiatives. So along with these grants and a lot of the other granting that we do, there are the community hubs, A Taste of Harmony, and the Welcoming Cities program that sits within Welcoming Australia, are our big flagship initiatives. So community hubs is a program that operates out of schools and works with women and brings them together to connect with each other, opportunities to learn English, opportunities to network, and really tries to connect in with that particular group of women who are newly arrived in Australia. A Taste of Harmony, hopefully lots of you will know about this. It's our national workplace campaign promoting cultural diversity in the workplace, where people prior to COVID certainly would come together and share food, and these days we're offering lots of online activities too. So that operates, that runs in March every year. And then Welcoming Australia, the Welcoming Cities program with them is a national standard that local councils can sign up to, supporting and promoting cultural diversity in their area. So that's just a little snapshot of us. And I will just check. There's just been a question around organisations. I'll probably come back to that one when we get to the actual how to apply section. The purpose of the annual community grants, as I said, is employment and literacy. This does get reviewed each year, but thinking about social cohesion, thinking about that settlement and that transition for migrants into Australia, these two areas are just so fundamental, and we know that employment assists with literacy. We know that literacy assists with getting employment, and we do often see grants that are an employment stream grant, but they're doing also some workplace literacy support or literacy programs that are really targeted towards a particular employment stream or sector, sorry. So there's obviously a lot of crossover at times between the two, and they're our focus for this year. The only eligibility criteria in order to apply for this grant is that you have deductible gift recipient status. So that DGR status, if you don't have it, it's something that you need to make arrangements for. So you can partner up with another organisation who may then auspice this grant for you, and they can apply on your behalf, or they can, you can have an agreement with them that they will take this grant on your behalf, and they provide that DGR status. Certainly for neighbourhood houses, we get lots of neighbourhood houses applying, and it's the National Association, the ANHCA, that provides that that DGR status, and they auspice these grants, and that often happens. So you can do one of two things. If you don't have DGR, you can still apply, and you can give us details of who will be that auspice. Or if you have a close relationship, often it might be the auspice body that's putting in the application on your behalf. So either way, and any questions about that, you can get in touch. But ultimately, by the time it comes, if you're successful with this, by the time we're looking to that grant agreement, we need to have, you need to have that auspice arrangement in place. For the implementation, you're applying now. The grants close mid-September. We then do the assessment, and successful and unsuccessful applications are notified very early December. So it's quite late. It does take us a little while. We've sort of got our own processes over the next few months, and end of November, perhaps this year, but certainly by early December, people are notified. So then implementation starts next year. So we expect an implementation for your project of around 12 months between January to December. Some are much shorter than that, but somewhere within January to December next year is when you'd be running your project. And it really depends on the kind of program that you're running, how long it's going to go for and when it will happen. Key dates, the most important thing really is the closing date now, which is Friday, 16th of September, closing at midnight. So please do get them in a bit earlier. Every year there's some issues, and I think we all have had that awful feeling of the technical issues right on closing time. So wherever you can, we do appreciate if you can get it in a little bit earlier. And as with last year, the funding is $30,000. So that's for one project. We are very happy to be a co-contributor to an initiative. If you have other funding sourced, if we're contributing to a broader program, that's fine. Equally, sometimes we are the sole funder for a project and it's just a small project. Let me move on. Were there any, just bringing up my chat. So sorry, I've just had someone ask, does the project need to be time limited or can it support ongoing existing programs? We do support ongoing existing programs. You would just need to still be able to specify what it is that we're contributing to. So perhaps we are contributing to one person or more, or 10 people who are participating for this period of time through an ongoing program, and you just still need to be clear about about what the outcomes are going to be, what the activities will be that we're contributing to. So absolutely fine if it's a bigger ongoing program. Let me move on. So the how to apply. We use the Smarty Grants grant platform. I don't know if there's anyone from our community here, but it's not the prettiest of platforms, but it is pretty easy to use. So I think it's quite user friendly. If you have any technical issues, when you log on, there's there is a contact number for Smarty Grants. So if you're having issues that are technical and issues creating a login, you can contact Smarty Grants directly. If you have questions about the grant, then you can contact us. But certainly that sort of technical platform stuff is direct to Smarty Grants. When you very first go in, before you've sort of logged in, you've got a few options. So if prior to actually starting a submission, you want to have a look at what our grant application form looks like, you've got a few options. You can just preview the form or you can download a PDF. And that can be handy if you wanted to share it around with your team as well, other people within the organisation who might want to have a look and might also be contributing to the application. But otherwise, you can simply click on Start a Submission. The application will then be linked to your email. So whoever's clicking that Start a Submission and that email, and then that email login will be the login for the application ongoing. You can share it around, but ultimately there'll just be one final login person who would then be our contact. There's also, we contact the person who has that login number and name, and then there's also a space for a second contact email within the application, which we really do encourage, because people change and take leave within the application, within the contact details. It's really helpful to make sure you've always provided us with 2 email addresses. So I will add that in. Someone has asked about tax concession charity. The deductible gift recipient status, and there is also the ITEC that goes along with that. I think if you have the DGR, you also have that ITEC is the income tax exemption. I actually am not sure what the tax concession charity is. Anthea, I don't know if you have any insight on that. Someone's asked whether that's an eligibility requirement.
Yeah, it's never been something that we've specifically asked for.
Okay, great.
I can answer the other 2, Rachel, with a PhD student whose research is closely aligned to the program, as long as it actually meets the criteria, which are very specific. So I'm not actually absolutely certain that a research piece would meet the criteria, but if they do, then certainly that's just fine to put in a submission for that. as far as, well, we don't specifically ask for letters of support. If you feel that that's something that is particularly relevant, you can actually make it as an attachment to the grant application. So that's fine too.
And sometimes, for example, with the employment stream and with the business relationships and relationships with local businesses, that can be helpful. I think if there's a new relationship there that you've started, if there's some evidence there, that can be helpful, but yeah, it's not required. And is the grant available for existing programs or projects or only new ones? No, it's available for existing ones as well. And in fact, if you currently receive a grant from us, you're able to apply again for your project this year. All right. So let me move on. So the key application sections. We look at the whole application when we're making an assessment. There are some key parts of it that really help us to understand what you're doing, and there are some parts that attract more of the scoring and are more heavily weighted. So I'll explain that a little bit. Describing what your organisation does. This is an opportunity for you to really help us get to know you, particularly if we haven't worked together before. And it's good to give us a sense of who you are. So if you're a small local volunteer-led organisation, or you're a large national community service organisation, if you work in a very particular sector or with a particular cohort of people, can all be really helpful to just give us a sense of who you are, and it shows a little bit more of your expertise.
Rachel, I think it's worth mentioning that we do like concise answers. That there isn't a lot of space within the application forms because of that, for just that reason, that we actually want people to be concise. And well, then after that, there is asking for a brief description of the project, which includes the aims and objectives. This is really important. This is our first exposure to whatever it is that you're asking for the funding for. And so it's particularly important that that description is doesn't ramble, is quite precise about what you're hoping that the project will do. And I would encourage you to sort of run your eye through the other aspects, particularly the key criteria that we'll get to in a minute, to make sure that when you're answering about the description of the project, you can actually highlight where it's particularly relevant. In regard to the project, the key criteria, as Rachel mentioned before, the criteria is very specific for the employment and for the literacy components. Now, the employment one of the things that we look for in particular is that organisations are working directly with local businesses. And so that's very important that you think that through as to how you're actually doing that, and what your level of engagement currently is with those local businesses, or how you aim to go about actually building that type of a relationship. So telling us how the project addresses that criteria is the most important area. And as Rachel mentioned, it is a point at which that is where we score you most particularly around how well you do those particular areas. So that's particularly important. I actually don't have the literacy criteria in front of me, so I can't share that. So I might wait until Rachel comes back at some point. But the expected outcomes too, and I should say that one of the particular areas that we want to know about is how well you've engaged with the potential participants to really understand what their needs are. That's really an essential component, rather than telling us what some data might be about particular communities' relationships with the world and what's happening. We really want to know very specifically about the individuals you're hoping to engage with, and why it is particularly relevant to them and their future, rather than anything in a particular general sense. So, Rachel, were you going to mention the literacy criteria here, or further on?
Further on. So this is sort of an overview of all of the different components, which is really good because I was going to go through all of those in detail as you have, but with some extra detail just coming up around the key criteria and the budget.
Okay, absolutely. So they're all the things that we're looking for.
My apologies, everyone. I'm back. All right. Let me just click back here.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah. So the key criteria, so as you mentioned, the key criteria is a bit more heavily weighted, and it is really important, and I can't stress this enough, that you address each of these key criteria individually within that section. So there's not a whole lot of word count, which in some ways makes it a little bit easier, keeps it brief, but it can be hard. It is really hard to explain everything that goes into your projects within just a short word count. We know there's always more to it than we can get down on paper. But as much as possible, if you're doing an employment program, if you're applying for the employment stream, these are your 5 key criteria, and we need to understand how you are meeting each of these. So the employment pathways, it is just about describing the sort of employment support that you will be offering to your participants. And I think the important word there is pathways. So we do really want to understand what you do within your program for this period of time with our grant leads people on to something else. And it, ideally it's employment, but it may also be volunteer opportunities and internships, the relationships that they build, the certifications that they might get within this process, and how that's really linking them in, that this is sort of the beginning or whatever point it is along their journey, but it is very much part of a continuous pathway for them. So you need to be thinking about where they go next, what they're linked into, so that they can continue on.
And as somebody just mentioned about local, so local does mean geographically local. So.
Yeah, and think about, because sometimes it's about how people are going to get to work, finding jobs that work for people's lives.
They can be national businesses. I've just noticed in the question in the chat, they can be national businesses, but they need to have facilities or locations in that local area. One of the problems we know is that for many people, it's exhausting. It would be exhausting for anybody to have to travel 2 hours to work and then 2 hours back from work. So we're trying to facilitate as much engagement as possible in and around where people are living, so that they don't have to spend that much time traveling themselves. Yeah.
So the local business engagement, we want to know that you've really thought about who those businesses are. So if you're working in a particular sector, so it can be aged care, that you have a relationship with potential employers, and you've already had to think about that, and to name them where possible. So it might be really specific. It might be the name of your local Coles, and that's who you're working with. It might be a bit more general than that, but as much as possible to give us the detail on who these businesses are that you'll be working with, or how you'll be working with them through chambers of commerce or whatever it might be. Because that relationship part of it, we know, is so important to successful employment programs and successful employment outcomes for your participants as well. So I think showing that you're helping to facilitate that relationship, that you've already thought about who that will be, and started to really build those networks yourself, and then to help all of your participants also create some networks for themselves. There's a question here about social enterprise. So would the application still be considered if the employment pathways were into our own organisation or social enterprise? Absolutely. In sort of the first instance. So I think social enterprises can provide a really lovely opportunity where you're providing the sort of employment support and that programmatic support, and then the opportunity for work experience and actual employment, all housed within the one space. So it can be a really supportive environment for people to get work experience and to get work. That said, I guess there's also still, it depends how many people you're wanting to work with. So I guess you can be limited if the only employment opportunity is within your own organisation. So I guess we'd want to think about how many people you're working with, and then also what may still be a pathway for them, and if there are any other opportunities as well. So it may still be that it could be a good idea that there's also connections to other opportunities, or you're still making sure that they're gaining skills and experience and all of the processes and the resume and interview skills that are going to help them after working for you as well. I think I've got quite a specific question that's come in. But still no pathway. I might come back to that one. I'll just get through this little bit around the selection criteria. So the employment pathways, local business engagement, and the mentors. That third one, the mentors, is also really important. I mean, they're all really important, but there's often a really special relationship there between mentors and your participants. So as I've already mentioned, obviously that relationship building and network building is a really big part of people being successful in finding employment, and mentors can play a really important role in that. They can often also, I think that relationship that they can develop through this program can be something that continues on for participants, which is really helpful. So we need to see that you are engaging mentors within the program. They can be lots of different things. They might be a handful of people who have HR and recruitment experience, and they're providing very general support for people around how to find jobs and how to conduct interviews and how to operate in an Australian workplace. Or you might be finding mentors that have really specific work experience themselves and are really sector specific, and you're finding an engineer and an accountant and a healthcare worker or something like that. So they can come in all shapes and sizes, but we just want to see that there's that opportunity for people to learn from other Australians and to build that relationship there.
Yeah. Rachel, to answer some of these questions and give you a bit of a moment's break, a community health organisation would definitely be considered a business in this context. Working with employers is also absolutely fine, as long as part of what you're doing is that there's an involvement of the potential employees in the process of training the employers. So I completely understand what Monique is talking about, interested in delivering training to increase the capacity of the organisations to understand what's involved. So that's definitely fine, but that ability to involve all participants is important in that process anyway. And then how about supporting participants to start or grow their own business? It really depends on how that program is developed. There are a number of different organisations, I'm sure you're aware of, Leighton, that do facilitate these types of opportunities, and they provide quite a wraparound set of services. So if what you're intending to do is also to provide the wraparound services that these individuals might need, then there's no problem with putting in an application along those sorts of lines.
Great.
There we go, Rachel.
Thank you. Excellent. The diverse groups, for this grant, we want to see that you're working with a diverse section of people. So we encourage you to work with not just a single language group or cultural group, but that you're bringing a diverse range of people together. It helps people to create networks with each other. For literacy programs, it helps people to practice their English. That one is hopefully fairly clear. And number 5 is the needs analysis, which Anthea touched on a little bit earlier. We really want to understand why you've designed this particular approach and this particular program for these people. So it's a bit about explaining to us that you'll be working with people who are newly arrived, and have never had any work experience and don't have any skills or qualifications, and therefore they need a very specific kind of program. Or perhaps you're working with people who are already highly trained and skilled and have work experience in their own country, but just need that first job in Australia. And so your approach and your program is going to be really different depending on the people that you're working with and what their needs are. And so that's that needs analysis, that you understand who your participants will be, what their needs are, and just showing that the project you're proposing to us meets those needs. And so this might have come out of a program you've already been running, and therefore you have that kind of needs analysis because you've been doing this and you've been working with these people already. You may have gone and done some consultation with particular groups, whatever it is, just to explain to us how you know that this is what's needed and that this is who your participants will be.
Just another question, Rachel, before you change slides. Our primary focus is particularly around the transition of migrants into Australian society, but we then don't mind what challenges they may be facing along with that. So in migrants with disabilities, that's fine as well. So they certainly qualify.
Great. So the second stream is the English literacy stream, and I've just put a note there. So these criteria have changed since last year. Some of the language was a little bit unclear. I think there was a little bit of double up often in the way people were interpreting the questions, and we have added in, it's that second one there, that targeted design, which is a little bit similar to the kind of needs analysis. So the very first one is literacy, and we're looking for projects that really actively and innovatively help to develop literacy skills, and I think particularly where people are working with adult learners. You know, we do look for more innovative ways of learning language. It's very different than working with children. Just to touch on that, I think there may have just been a miscommunication around transitional migrants. It's about migrant transition and their settlement and that journey of settling into Australia. The targeted design. So this is about, again, us understanding why you've designed this particular project for these particular people, the participants that you're intending to engage in this. We want to know who your participants are, their current level of literacy and English proficiency, and how your program has been designed really specifically to meet those needs, and how what you've designed really will deliver on their specific literacy needs. Because again, it's going to be very different if you're working with someone who is illiterate in their own language, or for someone who, you know, this might be their third or fourth language that they're learning. And if they are starting out with a sort of level 1 English, and these providing conversation classes and an opportunity for people to really practice, or you might be working with students who are trying to get into a university course and need that really high level English certification. It's going to be very different. How is literacy different from English proficiency? It's not in the way that I'm describing it yet. Practice with fluent English speakers. So that practice, very often we hear, particularly for programs that are working with people who are newly arrived in Australia, that they have such limited opportunity to practice their English with other Australians, and going out to the shops and just basic interactions might be the sum total of all they get. Also, it helps to build up a network for people, as they settle in Australia. So that opportunity for them to practice, a lot of programs will bring in volunteers or provide lots of other opportunities, but we are looking for a really strong component of the program that you're delivering is an opportunity for people to speak and converse and to practice with fluent English speakers. And I realise I've missed number 3, so let me just go back. So the applied English approach, criteria number 3, is about this being a really practical program for people as they're learning English and making it really relevant for their lives. So within that third criteria, we're looking for both English application that will be relevant for the workplace and relevant for day-to-day interactions. And people might be bringing school enrolment forms or letters from school from their children, or they might be bringing potentially employment-related forms or questions or things that they need to do to you, and that this program can help them to do that and can help them to improve their English on things that are really important and practical for them day to day. And so we've done the practice with fluent English speakers, and then finally the childcare. We do ask that you consider the childcare needs of all of your participants, so both male and female. You don't necessarily have to provide it yourself, but you need to have a think about and let us know how you're going to manage childcare needs of any of your participants. It's also a good idea to chat to the participants. Within some cultures, having your child cared for in a room separate to you isn't appropriate, and you're going to find much more success having the children in the same room, working with some women, and that's not necessarily true for all groups. So I think just making sure that whatever approach you're suggesting is appropriate to your participants. So there've just been oh, sorry about that. Just have a look at the English questions. So employment for people with disabilities without necessarily having a migration background. No, the Scanlon Foundation works exclusively to support migrants. And so we're not able to fund a program that is exclusively around disabilities. But if there are people from culturally diverse backgrounds and you're offering a particular program for people from culturally diverse backgrounds who also have a disability, then that's fine. It's just sort of an important qualification for us. Oh yeah, thanks, Avia. The budget. So I think every donor is slightly different, I think, in perhaps how they use some of this language around what we're expecting to see for this. So I just think it's always helpful to go through and really just explain what we're looking for with all of these different categories. Within the project income, we've got 6 different categories, and you may not fill out all of them, and that's fine. We're just asking that you put in whichever ones are relevant. So the first one is the funding from us. So whatever you're requesting for this grant, up to $30,000. The in-kind contribution. Often organisations may quantify their volunteer hours, and that would be an in-kind contribution. If you don't, as an organisation, it's not something that you do, that's fine. You don't have to, as long as you're doing it both on the income and the expenditure the same. Whether you do or don't, it doesn't matter. So in-kind might also be, you know, someone's providing a room or a space for the project. Does it help to apply for less than 30,000? No, it just needs to be relevant to the program that you're running, and the number of people that you're delivering, and what your program is. So we look very much at the whole application, meeting all of the criteria, meeting the needs of your participants, much more than whether or not you're applying for $25,000 or $30,000. Number 3 is the organisation core funding. So if you're contributing funding directly from your organisation and donations that you may have received otherwise, and that's going towards this program, put that in there. Government funding covers or local, state and federal. So if you have any grants that have come in or previous funding that's getting contributed towards this project, then that would go there. So just to be clear, this is the project income. It's not about your organisation as a whole. It's specifically to what you'll be running with the grant that you're requesting from us. Any other grants or donations, and fees for service. So a lot of organisations wouldn't have that fees for service. It is very specific, and that's fine to leave it blank and just put it as 0 where appropriate.
Rachel, just before you go on, the question from Ahmed. If you have a project that you think covers both employment and literacy, and the cost of the project itself would be greater than 30,000, which I think is the point that's being made here, what I would suggest is that you submit 2 applications. And I do want to clarify that the grants are up to $30,000. They're not, every grant is $30,000. So depending on how much you actually do need to deliver on the project. So if there are 2 different components of a particular project, I would submit for each of those. And potentially you could explain that there's some connectivity, but I think you'd have to submit 2, 1 for each of the different categories, because they'd be evaluated differently.
Yeah, so where's the, you need to be meeting that criteria on the employment program, and you need to be meeting the selection criteria and the literacy separately, and we need to understand how you're really delivering on both those separately. If you do have a program that's bigger than $30,000, though, we can't accept 2 separate projects for the same program, 2 separate applications for the same project that's just delivering to more people. We can only accept 1 application for 1 program, regardless of how many people you're trying to deliver to. Or if it's in a different location, similarly, with only 1 application. So this is what our budget page looks like, just to show you. So ultimately, the most important thing is that the income and the expenditure balance out. And I've just done a little draft up of what some of the components might be that you would put in there. So on the income side, there's the Scanlon Foundation grant that you're applying for, up to the $30,000. And let's say there was a local government grant, a sort of community development grant that you might have for $5,000. You're contributing $5,000 of your own organisational funding, and you've decided to quantify your in-kind contribution to this as well. So if that's the case, then on the other side, you might be funding a project coordinator. We are really happy to fund staffing for projects. So where they're working, it's their time delivering this project, that's absolutely fine. So let's say that's $35,000. You might be using your own organisation core funding for some of the support that sits around this project, the management, administration and finance support, and there's $3,000. And some volunteer support. So in this case, we're saying you are quantifying that, and you sort of charge out your volunteers at $20 an hour. It's just nominal, and it's just sort of showing how, and we're equaling on both sides around that in kind, and just how you value that volunteer support for this project. Some catering costs and room hire, and let's say that was in kind as well. So that's just an example of what it could look like. Yes, yeah, so absolutely, we're very happy for you to cover whatever costs directly relate to this project. So we won't cover costs that are general organisational costs, but where it relates specifically to the delivery of this project, that's absolutely fine.
Rachel, can we provide or can we put on the website perhaps a PDF of the actual form that needs to be filled in? Somebody said that sometimes it's difficult to click through and then go back again. So if we could provide a dummy form on the website, that'd be really useful.
It is possible, and when you do log in, you can download the PDF as well. But I can put up a link, probably in our FAQs, I can put a link there to just an example PDF of the application form. And if another organisation is offering pro bono work towards the project, I would consider that an in-kind contribution. You can add that in, you can put a dollar amount to that if you want to. You don't have to, you can just put that in as part of your project details that, this is a partner in the project. Sort of tips, I suppose, towards the very end, which is the most important part for us is addressing that selection criteria. So an employment stream or a literacy stream, making sure that you're addressing each of the 5 criteria individually within that section, and keeping to the word count, is going to set you up the best, really. That is where a lot of the weighting goes for our scoring, and it's going to help to be really clear then about how you're meeting what we need these projects to deliver on. Being specific, so showing that what you're offering is relevant to the very specific cohort of people you're wanting to support, and that comes in that needs analysis in the employment criteria and the targeted design within the literacy. So we want to know what's really specific and special about your project and how it meets the needs of the people that will be your participants. The importance of relationships. So whether it's with the participants, the mentors or the employers, what really helps is when it comes through that we can see you really know who your participants will be and what their needs are, that you're able to build strong relationships with mentors or volunteers within the program and employers within the employment stream is really helpful. And please do write specifically for this grant round. It's such a limited word count. It will really help you if you're just writing really directly to the questions that we've asked and to those criteria. And now, are there any more questions?
So Rachel, this recording will be made available to everybody, won't it?
Yeah, it will be. So we put this up on our website. And we will make a link available through that grants page. I'm not sure if we'll send it, if we're able to send it directly just to the participants, but we'll certainly do that if we can. And there's been a question there around, can an organisation apply for more than one project? Absolutely. You can put in multiple applications for separate projects. That's fine.
Yeah, and also that this is really about our annual community grants. So funding of research is a different topic altogether. So
I see the one at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, and some projects do. We have a literacy project at the moment that has some research that sits alongside it, which is more of that active research, perhaps, where they are still implementing a program. It's about improving literacy for participants, and they're conducting research that sits alongside that program. That's great to see and really interesting, but exclusively research we don't fund through the annual community grants.
We don't have a threshold around government funding. It's really the quality of the project and whether or not there's a need for our particular support into that program. So, but otherwise there isn't a threshold regarding government funding. If people want to talk about research, then send me an email.
They can. I've just
email to the foundation website, foundation email address there.
Yes.
And we'll be able to respond to that.
Yeah, so feel free to get in touch if you have any particular
and
questions.
There's no limits as to how much money goes towards staff costs. We absolutely know that if you want to get something done, you've got to have somebody there to do it. So we completely understand that. What we don't want you to do is to sort of underestimate what it might cost to deliver on a project. We do have an upper limit to what the grant can be, but we want all of these projects to be successful. So I would encourage you to be honest and not try and sort of manipulate things so that it sounds like you can do something when maybe you actually can't do it for that particular cost.
Great. And please don't forget the closing date. Oh, thank you very much for the COVID message. I appreciate that. Apologies again for the coughing. But Friday, 16th of September at midnight is our closing date, and we're unable to accept anything after this. But I do, unless there are any other questions, I think we can wrap up a little bit early then today. That's great, 12 minutes to go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We really do appreciate you taking the time out just to listen to us chat this through, and hopefully it helps you manage your application and your time as well when we go through this. So looking forward to seeing all of your wonderful applications as they come through, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Great.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Anthea, too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.